This is the solution to the Colors Table View challenge. For this challenge, we are to create a public GitHub repository. So I go to my GitHub account and click on New Repository. The repository name is the same as the project, Colors. The Colors project is the solution to the Colors Table View challenge is my description. It's a public repository with a README and a gitignore based on Swift. I create the repository, and then as I usually do, I take the gitignore and I edit it so that in the other section, I indicate that I'm also going to ignore .dsstore files. I add that, go down to the commit, and say added .dsstore to gitignore. And I commit the change directly to the master branch. I go to my repository to the clone or download button, and I copy to the clipboard the URL for cloning this repository. I open my terminal and go to where I hold my iOS projects. I then clone the repository by typing git clone and the URL. This creates the colors folder with a README in it. It also has the files .gitignore and the directory .git, which is used for managing the repository. So this is our starting repository. So now I'm going to create a new Xcode project that is an iOS single view application called Colors. It's going to be done in the Swift language, and it's going to be a universal layout so it supports all the iOS devices. And I'm going to put this in the folder that was created when I cloned my repository. And so now we have a folder called Colors that has my Xcode project in it. The first thing that I am to do is delete the viewcontroller.swift file. And I'm deleting this because this name is way too generic to be in an application. We should name our files for what it is that they do or what it is they contain, and viewcontroller is too generic. So I'm going to hold the control key down, click on viewcontroller, select delete, and move it to the trash. If I go to the main storyboard, I have my pre-created, when I created the project view controller, I can use this. It has the starting arrow, so it indicates that this is the view controller that is the initial view controller. And right now it has a custom class of view controller, which doesn't exist anymore because we deleted it. So I'm going to delete that out of there. This now has no custom class. I'm going to create a custom class for the view controller that is appropriately named. So I'm going to click on the folder that says Colors here, which contains my project files, hold the control key down and click and say New File. And then I'm going to create an iOS Cocoa Touch class file. If it doesn't say subclass of UI view controller, make sure it does. And then the view controller that we are creating is to list our colors, so I'm going to call it the Colors View Controller. So Colors View Controller is a subclass of UI View Controller. I'm going to save that file in my project, and then I'm going back to my storyboard and selecting the View Controller and going to Custom Class and type C. It's the only file that I have in my project that's of type UI View Controller, because I'm inheriting from UI View Controller, so it knows to fill in the rest. I hit Enter, and now this view controller is going to use the class Colors View Controller. My view controller is going to contain a table view, so I'm going to my library and searching for table view. I drag and drop a table view into my view controller, and then I want to pin it on all four sides, so I'm going to go to Add New Constraints, select all four sides, and indicate that I don't want to constrain to the margins because I want my table view to go all the way to the edge of the display on the leading and trailing sides. So 0 points to the edges, and then I want to be a certain distance from the top layout guide and from the bottom layout guide. And I want to be 0 points away from the top layout guide and the bottom layout guide. Now we're going to be going relative to the layout guides because if we add a navigation controller, that would add a navigation bar at the top, and that would be a top layout guide. If we had a tab bar controller and we had tabs at the bottom, or if we had a toolbar at the bottom, that toolbar or the nav bar would be in the bottom layout guide. So we need to have our table view adjust if there are things placed above and below it, and by being relative to the layout guides, if something appears in the top and bottom areas, then the table will be 0 points from them. So I'm going to say add for constraints. Table view occupies the full viewing area minus the status bar at the top. And now if I select the table view and go to its properties, to its attributes, we're going to indicate that we need one prototype cell because this is going to be the design of our cells in the table. And if I select that cell, I'm going to give it a reuse identifier of color cell. This is how we're going to request these cells by identifier. So we need to remember color cell in its camel case. The style of the cell is going to be basic, which gives us a title, which is a label in the cell. And then lastly, we need the table view to have a data source and delegate. That it must have an object or objects that can fulfill the role of being a data source and fulfill the role of being a delegate. So we need to specify what object is going to serve that role for the table view. And we have two ways to do that. One way is in code. The other way is here in Interface Builder. And that's the way that I'm going to choose for this example. So I'm going to hold the Control key down and click drag from the table view to the icon that represents the colors view controller, leave up and select data source. And then I'm going to select the table view again, hold the Control key down, Control click drag, and select delegate. So if I hold the Control key down and click on the view controller icon, we see that the table view is using the colors view controller as its data source and delegate. I can also Control click on the table view, and we can see that the data source and delegate for the table view is the colors view controller. So we have our colors view controller, and it has been set as the custom class. It is also serving as the data source and delegate for the table view. Now, as the data source and delegate, this particular object must follow two protocols. And they are UI table view data source and UI table view delegate. By indicating that colors view controller is going to follow these two protocols, we're indicating that certain methods need to be written. First method that we often think about implementing is number of sections in table view. We're handed a table view and we are to respond how many sections are in that table view. So we're returning an integer. For this challenge, we're going to have a single list of colors in one section, so we're going to return 1. The next question we need to answer, and these answers are going to be in the form of functions that get called, and they all begin with table view from here on out. The next question we need to answer is the number of rows in a given section. So we're going to be given a table view, and we're going to be given a section, and we are to respond how many rows in that section. Well, we don't have any data yet. The data that we are supposed to use is a list of colors. So I'm going to copy these colors, and I'm going to create an array that holds this list of colors as an array of strings. So my array is going to be called colors, and I am going to initialize it with this set of colors, and these are going to be strings, so they need to be contained within double quotes. So we have red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple. We don't need the word and then finally our last one is brown. So we have an array called colors that is an array of strings. I can hold my option key down and click and we can see it's an array of string. And these are the colors that are going to be listed in the cells of the table view. So here in table view, number of rows and section, we only have one section. It's a section based on this array of colors. So we can return colors.count. The number of colors is the number of rows that we're going to have, the number of cells in our table view. And then finally, we need to, for each row, specify a cell. So this is going to be cell for row at index path in the table view. So we're going to be given an index path, and we need to return the cell for that position. And index paths, as a reminder, contain section and row count. So we know how many rows and we know how many sections. Let's just check that out here. We can say index path dot section, and we can also have index path dot row. So every index path is a structure that is going to give us the section and row that we're in. So I need to get a cell, and to retrieve a cell based on the prototype cell that we have in the table view, we're going to call the Q reusable cell on the table view. So I'm going to say let cell equal table view dot dequeue reusable cell with identifier. Now the identifier is the reuse identifier that we set in the storyboard on the cell. We go to the cell. Here the identifier is color cell. So the reusable cell that we're going to dequeue has an identifier of color cell. And then the index path for the cell is the index path that we are passed into table view cell for row at index path. So I can take what I've been provided and pass it along to the dequeue reusable cell. So now we have a cell, and ultimately we are going to return that cell. And on that cell, there is a label that is going to contain the title, and that label is going to be not named label. It's going to be named text label. So cell.text label is what is being displayed here as title. So the label has a text property, and that is how we set the text on the text label. And the color is what we want to display in that label. And it's going to come from the array colors. So I'll say colors, and then I need to index to the particular color. And index path contains the section and row. And since there's only one section, we're going to ignore it, and we're going to get the row in that section. And so the row that we are in the section is the same row that we're in this array of colors. So cell.textlabel.text is equal to colors indexed on indexPath.row. Now we are told here that UI label is an optional type, so text label is an optional. So we can use optional chaining so that if text label is nil, then nothing after the question mark is going to be executed. So there's not going to be an attempt to set the text on the text label. On the other hand, if text label contains a label, it'll be unwrapped and we'll call .text on it and then set it to the particular color. So if I run this now, we get a table view that contains the list of colors. And if we select, we see we don't navigate anywhere yet. That's coming, but we're able to select these. Finally, we're going to use our source control menu to make a commit of our work. So built functionality for challenge. And I'm going to push this to GitHub, to the master branch. And we're done.